Consumption often shows up as a numbing agent that fortifies and perpetuates structural coercion while distancing ourselves from our very truths as individuals walking this earth with unique goals and desires and ambitions. There are two distinct types of consumption that I'll mention today. One is mindless consumption. So this is the consumption of like endless social media content, political content, divisive information, anything that you kind of turn to as a distraction that you inherently know is not very good for you. For me, this shows up when I'm obsessively reading news and I get to a point where I feel so helpless and so out of control that any semblance of agency in my life seems to have diminished. The second type of consumption is intentional consumption. This could be things like engaging with social critique or artists whose work you really admire or listening to music that you love that makes you think or makes you feel deeply. I would say that intentional consumption is anything that is a creative propeller. This is going to be really distinct from person to person, and some behaviors might even fall into both categories for the same person. My intention is to move away from mindless consumption and into more intentional consumption, which will hopefully catalyze more creativity in my life. A lot of the conversations about consumption and our impact as individuals has really harped on this element of shame, where we point a finger at each other and we blame one another for the conditions that we currently exist under. But the only way that we can affect change is to create a supportive environment for people to actually acknowledge things like structural coercion. There are so many reasons why people might make poor decisions as consumers. And I don't know anyone who has ever changed their lifestyle because of shame. Shame typically spirals out into deeper feelings of self-loathing, which just results in more mindless consumption in many cases. So let me take a step back for a second. I've been thinking about these sort of cycles that I drew out. The first cycle is the consumption cycle. We experience despair or anxiety or fear or some sort of negative emotion that compels us to engage with something. Maybe you feel really stressed out and unhappy with your job, and like you get a little dopamine hit when you buy yourself something online. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like it could be intentional consumption in some instances, but if it becomes a pattern, that purchase, that consumption might lead to further despair, thus resulting in a cycle of despair, consumption. Maybe a more relatable example of this pattern would be reading the news. For me, if I'm feeling down, I might go on my phone, then I might encounter a news story about what's going on in the world, and then I start to feel more despair. But then I kind of can't help but reading more about what's going on, and again, this cycle perpetuates. My goal is to replace this despair and consumption cycle with a despair and creation cycle. So what this new cycle will look like is I'm experiencing a depth of despair. I feel anxiety. I feel depressed. I feel miserable. Instead of picking up my phone and scrolling, the new default behavior that I'd like to adopt is drawing or journaling in that exact instance wherever possible. Obviously, you can't always do this. Maybe you have to go to work somewhere in person, but what you could do is you could keep a pocket journal with you at all times, or a small sketchbook, or, even the notes app in your phone where you can brain dump some sort of idea. You can sketch something for 2 minutes. It can be something really small. It doesn't have to be this grand thing where you're creating a masterpiece every time you feel despair. By answering despair with creativity, the result is a little less despair. The reality is, I think most of us kind of disrespect a lot of our ideas. And so in the new year, with this idea of more creativity, more creating over consumption, I would encourage you to start documenting your ideas. I've talked to a lot of people who don't perceive themselves as creative, and so they're intimidated by even just the word creative, like the idea of making something, bringing something into reality. But the fact of the matter is, I think your average person probably has about a dozen ideas a day that go largely unnoticed and undocumented. So what I propose to you is that maybe you start carrying a small journal with you and you just jot down any ideas that come to mind. It doesn't have to be like an intentional thing where you sit down and you try to force out an idea, but rather throughout your day, if you notice, oh, I just had an interesting idea. Maybe the idea is really small. It's like an idea about a new recipe you want to try. Or maybe it's a really big idea about some piece of concept art you'd like to create and bring into reality. I think that we are inherently problem solvers as humans, which kind of like implies creativity, because if you're solving problems, you have to think outside of the box in order to come to some new idea or a new solution. And then you have to put it into action and see what the outcome is. If you see yourself as the guardian of ideas, you start to rewire the way you think about yourself creatively. I had a big idea recently, and I'm going to tell you about it, whether you like it or not. I have been struggling a lot with anxiety and dissociation, which are both byproducts of my OCD. As a consequence, I often don't like leaving my house, which is not a very good pattern. And I've been stuck in this sort of cognitive groove where I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to go out and do things outside of my comfort zone because I feel safe at home and I don't feel safe not at home. As you can imagine, this has created a number of challenges for me socially and otherwise. So an idea that I had just before the new year began was that every weekend this year, I'm going to go to a new environment and bring my sketchbook, my journal, my headphones, whatever I need to feel safe. And instead of bending for environments around me, I'm going to bring things to environments that I can adapt to so that they start to feel safe to me. And then by like doing safe things in new environments, I can develop new associations and hopefully kind of rewire some of this anxious thinking and behaving. So like I said, the idea can be anything. It can be life-changing. It can be silly. It can be fun. It can be very serious and very meaningful to you. Just write your ideas down. Get more acclimated with your creativity through the process of ideating. And if you don't have as much time and you don't like work from home or, you have a lot going on, maybe pick up a pocket journal and just carry it around with you. And anytime a little idea or interesting thought pops up, just write it down. Another suggestion that I'd like to offer up for creating more than you consume is writing love letters to your gremlins. Any of the negative emotions and like feelings that you're experiencing from your day to day, especially the ones that won't go away, maybe it's rumination or really intense dread or anxiety or existential doom, whatever it might be, those are your gremlins. And your gremlins are a part of you and they're not going to go away if you try to fight them. Perhaps what you can do instead of trying to fight your gremlins is seek to make a piece of art for your gremlins. For me, as someone who ruminates constantly and like my brain is like a tire stuck in mud all day long, I have found that repetitive creative activity is a really helpful way to kind of meet my mind where it's at. So maybe that means just stippling and doing line work and like really detailed, repetitive motions as I'm illustrating, because it kind of mirrors what's happening in my mind, but in a loving, slow way. I know it sounds like cheesy and like I'm romanticizing my gremlins or whatever, but I think that it helps. I think it helps to like, instead of feel all these complex, deep, challenging emotions and see them as purely negative and something to avoid, welcome them into your creative process. Get your gremlins out on paper, create something for them. Even if whatever you create looks terrible or sounds like shit or just doesn't come out the way you want it to, that's okay. The process of getting acquainted with creating more frequently is the important part of this whole thing. There are times where I film a video and I don't feel very good about it, but I post it and someone might like it anyways. Or I journal and my handwriting looks really sloppy and the thoughts that are kind of pouring out of my mind don't really make any sense. But then afterwards, I feel better because I participated in the process of ideating and creating. Anyways, we exist in a society that profits off of our fear and our dread. We live in a society that unfortunately prioritizes transactional exchange. It does not prioritize creativity, self-expression, healing, kindness, compassion. And I think that stepping into a more creative mentality rather than that of constantly consuming to mask our dread and our terror, we can get closer to ourselves and through that closer to the people around us. We are inundated by artificial everything right now, and to create is to tap into what is authentic. It is to tap into what is most human. So use your creativity as an act of rebellion. Use your creativity to revolt against a system that wants us all to fail, that wants us to be miserable, that wants us to perceive only a future that's dreadful. Because for us to flourish would mean we flood the zone with humanity. I wanted to just share this because it's truly a big goal of mine to create more in this coming year. There are a lot of times where I have ideas and I shrug them off, or I convince myself that I don't have the time to attend to them. But the times where I've chased an idea down are the moments in my life that have been the most gratifying. I implore you to go create something. Grab your journal, grab a sketchbook, your camera, whatever it is that brings you some sense of joy and connection to yourself that allows you to relish in your creative power. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. If you like this video, leave a comment down below, subscribe, you know the deal. I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, we have to work together to create a future that we actually want. Bye.